Hey, this is Super Game Ghost, and you're watching the top 10 worst SNES games. Let's start. The Rocketeer is a video game based on the 1991 Disney film. It was originally released on PCs in 1991 and ported to the SNES in 1992. I remember seeing this air on TV every now and then when I was a kid. Whenever it was on the TV, I quickly made sure to switch the channel. I just remember thinking that it was way too boring and that it looked lame. I think most people had that same sentiment since this movie was a commercial flop. Now the video game isn't much better. The first level is a racing game, and at first it seems unbeatable, until you realize that you need to watch this smaller screen here in order to maneuver the plane. The next level is a shootout in a warehouse. You gotta shoot all the guys up before they can shoot you. And now we're racing again. You think you can guess what the next level is? Oh yeah, it's a shootout in the warehouse again. Amazing. I think I got the gist game. According to Moby Games, Rocketeer has an average score of 5.1 out of 10. Alien vs. Predator is a beat-em-up game which was released in 1993. In this game, you control a lone predator battling hordes of xenomorphs across various levels. First thing you might notice is how the upbeat music doesn't quite fit this game's overall look and feel. It's kind of reminiscent of the music used in Turtles in Time, but you'd figure AVP would have something a little more dark and gritty. Gameplay is not too bad. You have an okay assortment of attacks and are even able to use the Predator's shoulder cannon. The only thing that kind of detracts from the gameplay is the somewhat sluggish controls. Another thing about this game is that the enemies lack variety, and they all have way too much health for just being normal enemies. At first, the bosses at the end of the stage seem very difficult, but you'll eventually find that the bosses and the game are actually extremely easy when you start spamming the slide attack. Needless to say, this is not an impressive game. The one thing that I do like about this game is the Predator's scream when he performs his ultimate attack. AVP also has an average score of 5.1 out of 10. Timecop is a side-scroller based on the 1994 sci-fi action film of the same name starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. JCVD movies are freaking sick, but this game is not. This thing is basically a poorly written fanfic sequel of Timecop, and I'm actually surprised that they even bothered writing a story for this janky game. You play as Max Walker, who was tasked with stopping Dr. Hans Kleindast, an evil scientist who is apparently also the original inventor of time travel. Why does every evil scientist look ridiculous like this? The sprites in this game are all digitized versions of the actors who were recorded in front of a blue screen. This is why the enemies' movesets look so robotic, but at least they kind of got Jean-Claude's movements down. Overall, the game itself is nearly unplayable with the horrible level designs and uncooperative controls. Timecop has an average score of 5 out of 10. Captain America and the Avengers is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game. It was developed by Data East and was released in 1993. The game is a port of the popular arcade game, though the SNES version comes with some changes and limitations due to hardware constraints. I feel like making a beat-em-up video game is supposed to be almost impossible since it is so formulaic in nature. This game proves that this is not actually the case. The controls input response time is very slow, while the enemies' hitboxes are absurdly narrow. This game features Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Vision as playable characters. Out of all the heroes you can play as, Hawkeye surprisingly seems to be the strongest Avenger. The thing about this game is that each hero has an extremely short window of invulnerability after being hit, so the enemies can essentially keep juggling you around until you're dead. Yeah, this is not a beat 'em up I ever want to play again. Avengers has an average score of 4.9 out of 10. The Hunt for Red October is a side-scrolling action game. It is based on the 1991 film, which in turn is based on the Tom Clancy novel. What do you do as a video game developer when you only have about 10 to 20 minutes of actual gameplay in your video game? Well, obviously, you up the difficulty until your game becomes almost impossible to get through, and you also gotta make sure that dying even once will game over the player and revert them back to the title screen. This is the sort of design that almost every cash grab bad video game had back in the day, and the hunt for Red October is no different. Additionally, as per usual, the controls are sluggish, the sound effects sound terrible, the music in this game is 1 or 2 tracks which are looped endlessly, and the graphics are just whatever. This is the epitome of a bad game. The Hunt for Red October also has an average score of 4.9 out of 10. Wayne's World is a side-scrolling platformer game released in 1993. It is based off the 1992 comedy film. I actually owned this game for a day or two back in the 90s. My dad had bought it for me as a gift. I immediately unboxed it and started playing it. I didn't really care how the game looked or what it was. The 7-year-old me was just happy to have a new game for my Super Nintendo. My dad, on the other hand, was so horrified at how unbelievably bad the game looked that he had to convince me to return the game and get another game instead. Now that I'm seeing this game again, I would have to agree with my dad. Wayne's character sprite looks downright freakish, and the enemy sprites all just blend into the level. Everything kind of blends into everything with this game. I can't even tell which way to go to get through the first damn level. This game really sucks, and that shitty SNL movie it's based on isn't all that funny either. Wayne's World has an average score of 4.8 out of 10. Dirt Racer is a 1995 off-road racing game. It was released exclusively in Europe. I think the thought process behind making this game was, hey, let's make a 3D game for the Super Nintendo using the Super FX chip technology. Who cares if it's even playable or if the end product can even be considered a game? I really can't imagine anyone actually even thinking that this is a legit video game. This thing barely even works. The car runs at a snail's pace, and the physics in the game makes it seem as though you're handling a motorboat and not a car. Also, the car will blow up if you tap it lightly against any of the barely visible 3D objects a few times. The game will also just crash most of the time for no particular reason. Dirt Racer has an average score of 4.7 out of 10. Last Action Hero is a 1993 side-scrolling action game. The game is based on the 1993 movie of the same name starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. I loved this movie when I was a kid. Unfortunately, the SNES game is absolutely terrible. Firstly, the kid looks nothing like the actual kid in the movie, and the character sprite for the main character looks nothing like Arnold Schwarzenegger. This game is exceedingly difficult and is a case much like the Hunt for Red October, where the extreme difficulty is covering up the fact that the game itself is very one-dimensional, short, and shitty. Now in terms of gameplay, you only have one punch and a mostly useless kick in this game. Not much to work with. The enemies, on the other hand, have lots of life and are very hard to deal with. You aren't even able to hit them if they are even slightly off-screen. What's more, I actually managed to die in this game because I ran out of time while dealing with the insanely hard enemies. I don't think that's ever actually happened to me in any other game I've played. Ever. The cherry on top is that you get the same 10-second loop of music played over and over and over again. The Last Action Hero has an average score of 4.6 out of 10. Captain Novelin is a 1992 educational platformer game. I can't really badmouth this game too much, because Captain Novelin is essentially an interactive way to teach children how to manage type 1 diabetes. It was funded by the pharmaceutical company that makes the Novelin brand of insulin, and thousands of copies of the game were distributed to hospitals to give out for free. Yes, the game is very bad, but what can you really expect with a game that's meant to teach kids about diabetes? Not exactly Game of the Year material. One of the more amusing and partially depressing parts in this game is how the game will not allow you to proceed after a certain point if your blood glucose level is too high. The biggest complaint I have about this game is that, much like the real world, it is extremely hard to avoid all the junk food enemies roaming around each stage. Captain Novelin also has an average score of 4.6 out of 10. Pit Fighter is a fighting game released in 1991. This game looks laughably bad, and when I first played it, I also couldn't help but laugh. This game is just absolutely impossible to beat. If God forbid the enemy ever managed to get close to you, you're as good as dead. I tried button mashing my way out of the enemy's barrage of uninterruptible attacks, but I end up losing every time. Another funny bit is how your character just turns dull and gray when they are beaten to death, and it's game over from there. What a masterpiece of a game. Pit Fighter has an average score of 4.3 out of 10 according to Moby Games, and it wins the title for the absolute worst game for the SNES. Thanks for watching. Check out my other videos.